You asked for it, and I'm going to do it for you. 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you will learn how to do vertex form, okay? So I'm going to teach you in 5 minutes how to do vertex form starting now. All right, so let's start out with the first thing, the original parabola of all parabolas, the OG of them all, y equals x squared. This is how it looks in the graph. Notice at the center point of the vertex, or what, as we call it, the vertex. Oh, yeah, I can't believe I'm actually saying that, but that's the vertex of the y equals x squared. So keep that in mind when we're basically going over the other things. Oh, and by the way, this equation right here, the one that you see here, that right there is how you write it in vertex form, the y equals x squared. So okay, so let's move on to the next part. What is the vertex form? Y equals a parentheses x minus h parentheses squared plus k. That is the equation for it. But you might be asking, what are the terms that are on there? I don't even know what the heck they are. Well, very easy. X and y are any point on this parabola over here. So for example, in the parabola here, if I click on a random point over here, that is the x coordinate and that's the y coordinate. I can plug that in into the vertex form. And if I am given any of these terms and except one, I can figure out the other missing term. So let's say, for example, a and h term, we didn't have them and I'm trying to solve for k. I can easily figure it out by plugging in a point, knowing that I know a and I know also h term. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're looking at vertex form. Let's move on to the a term very quickly. A term is very simple. Here is the first example of it. If it opens up, it means that it's going to be a positive a term, okay? But what happens if it's a negative? Well, it opens down. This is how the parabolas will look if they have a negative. So any parabola that it has a negative term will open down, okay? Keep that in mind, especially with the next thing that I'm going to teach you about the a term. So that's the a term, the first property. Let's go to the second property. The second property states that if the number is greater than 1 or less than 1, then the parabola will look like this. It will look narrow compared to the original parabola. So notice here that I have y equals x squared, which is in the black line, and y equals x squared. The y equals 2x squared, well, look at that thing. It looks very narrow. So it looks like a skinny parabola is what we call it. Sometimes the kids call it that. I call it that too, because that's how I learned it when I was in high school. So let's move on to the next thing. What if it's between the 1 and the negative 1? What happens then? Well, then the parabola is wider than the original parabola. So notice here we have y equals 1/2 x squared, which is between 1 and negative 1. Notice how it is basically a wide parabola, or as I used to call it in high school, a fat parabola. So there you go. That's the a term in a nutshell. Let's move on to the next terms. The next term that we're going to need to look at is the h term. What is the h term telling us? Well, if the h term turns out to be a negative, well, this is what happens. It moves to the right. So the h term will tell you whether it's moving to the left or if it's moving to the right. If it's moving to the right, it's a negative term, and that's how it's going to look in the parabola. And the parabola is a vertex equation. Okay, so remember that. If it's a negative, it'll move to the right for the h term. But what if it's a positive? What then? Well, if it's a positive, it'll move to the left instead. So it'll move to the left side. But you might be asking me, wait a minute. Look at this point here. It's -2, but the equation has +2. Why is it? Well, the equation of y equals ax minus h squared plus k has a minus sign. It has this little minus sign over here. That minus sign has to be respected. It's not the same as these negatives that you have on the graph. They are separate negatives. So that means that this -2 and this negative become a double negative. So that becomes a positive. And that's why the +2 exists for moving it to the left side instead of to the right side. But if it's a positive number, you plug it in, well, guess what? That negative over here will make it into a negative because a positive and a negative turns into a negative. So let's go to the next part. Next part is actually the easiest one to learn, the k term. The k term, well, let's see. If it's a positive, it moves up. And if it's a negative, it moves down. So there you go. There's the two of them that basically pop out when you're looking at the vertex form equation. Ta-da! Done in 5 minutes. And if you have any questions, let me know. Bye-bye.